I'm delighted to introduce David Maxwell from Dumfries and Galloway Council, who I think we've talked about the policy frameworks here and the imperatives, but David, I'm delighted to introduce you to inject how it looks like on the ground and how teachers and we all can engage with this. Over to you.
Thanks, Betsy. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be with you. What I plan to do this afternoon is just carry on from really where Betsy and Jacqueline have left off, a little bit about that national context, the policy landscape that we all work in, and how we take that forward into the school improvement planning process. Those of you who are on the call who are head teachers and senior managers, and indeed all staff within education, will be now starting to think about contributing to your school improvement plan for the year ahead. And it's really important for me in my role here as a quality improvement officer in Dumfries and Galloway about making those connections for our practitioners, making those connections across that national, local, and then to school planning landscapes, but also making that connection to some of the international work that's going on around LfS as well. So I plan to do that over the next 10 minutes or so. It will be a whistle-stop tour, but happy to follow up with other conversations as and when. So thank you, Betsy. If you'd like to move on to the next slide, that would be great. And just to help my bandwidth here, I'm just going to turn my camera off and hope that will help. So the national context is huge. We know that national context is huge. Some of those images on the screen there just now you'll recognise from Betsy's presentation. Others on the screen there, including the standards, you'll recognise from Jackie's piece of work. For my role as a quality improvement officer, I have a remit here in Dumfries and Galloway for quality with a number of schools and clusters, but I also have a curriculum remit. And my curriculum remit focuses on those areas that are on screen here. So in the top left-hand corner, very much LfS. So we have the 2030 action plan, the different documents from PISA and Children's Parliament and the University of Dundee report, and I'll talk more about those in a second. But we've got the LfS context. The middle documents there are very much STEM related, moving into the STEM strategy, to the green skills agenda, to the government's action plan around STEM, and then we move into curriculum. And what Curriculum for Excellence tells us, and we've heard already about entitlements and where LfS sits within Curriculum for Excellence. Towards the right-hand side of the screen there, we've got that huge piece of work that's going on around the OECD reports, Professor Ken Muir's review, the national discussion. And along the bottom there, we've got our self-evaluation documents, we've got How Good Is Our School, we've got Education Scotland's LfS toolkit, we've got the professional standards that Jackie mentioned. Then moving into the maths and numeracy work, we've got the Making Maths Count report and the recently published NRIM report. And then thinking very much there in the centre about the National Improvement Framework, and Betsy has spoken a little bit about that. So for me in my role, and for me in my role of trying to support our head teachers and practitioners in Dumfries and Galloway, it's about making sense of that landscape. That landscape is huge and very varied, and about taking that landscape and starting to make sense of it. So, Kirsten, if you could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So, not going to labour the point about the National Improvement Framework, but we've got an updated National Improvement Framework for 2023. And very much you've heard there from Betsy that excellence and equity agenda and the addition of a louder voice around sustainability and where sustainability fits in. And I've just picked out a few quotes there, and if Kirsten presses once more, you'll see there the kind of these golden words that I'm picking out as I go through the next few slides. So very much there, the National Improvement Framework is asking us all to think about values, attitudes, knowledge and skills. It's asking us because our young people are telling us they want to learn more about climate change. They want to know more about climate education, about how they can support and encourage and work with us on the biodiversity crisis. They want to be involved. Youth participation is very much an aspect that we are asking our schools here to consider, and that youth voice agenda. And you've heard that through some of the work from Jacqueline there about the place of children's rights and children's in all that we do. And through that updated action plan that will come our way very soon for LfS, it's about that quality. What is the quality of learning that takes place around LfS? Because currently we're seeing that is variable. It's variable across schools, it's variable across classrooms, it's variable across local authorities. So how do we work to enhance that quality of learning and teaching and that quality of experience around LfS? And something we've worked on down here in D&G for the last couple of years is thinking about what those key performance indicators, what those KPIs could look like for LfS. And we're ever hopeful in the new action plan that comes out, we will have some way of recording that impact, some way of showing the impact that we are having with this work. So as I say, those are some of my kind of thoughts around the National Improvement Framework and the areas of focus we want in that area. If Kirsten moves on to the next slide, again, very similar. This is the Putting Learner at the Centre, Ken Muir's review, and Kirsten, if you press again, just highlighting some of those golden words, some of those golden vocabulary that I have chosen to pick out from Professor Muir's review. So again, values, skills, knowledge, and attitude. Environment, thinking about climate change, the place of rights, and any work that we do moving forward with the curriculum and what our new curriculums in Scotland will look like moving forward. Rights, and particularly that Article 29, have to be the foundation of taking that work forward. So that marries nicely to the work that Betsy and Jacqueline have already spoken about. The next one there about climate change, about our approaches to learning and teaching, particularly outdoor learning in the case of this quote, and getting our children and young people outside, enjoying their outside spaces, whether that's in their playground, in their local communities, and indeed beyond as we move up through the school system. And that diversity is very much important for us in Dumfries and Galloway and many other local authorities. We don't necessarily have that diversity of culture, that diversity of society. How do we bring that in, and how do we show that? I've been in a school this afternoon with my quality improvement head on, but that school this afternoon has links with a school in Iceland and the work that they are doing to compare the work of schools in their small village in southwest Scotland to what a school looks like in Iceland, and the learning that the children are doing with each other about learning about their schools and learning about their communities. And importantly, again, in that last quote, children having a voice, children's voices being heard, children's voices being listened to, and those voices impacting, and those voices having action, taking that action forward. So thank you, Kirsten. And again, similar on the next slide, I think a really useful document, and a document I've certainly spent a bit of time reading, and we've spent a bit of time reading with our Learning for Sustainability groups down here in Dumfries and Galloway, is the Children's Parliament report. As a primary teacher, this one sings to me, because this one is very much the voice of primary children, and it's what our primary children are asking for. So Kirsten, if you can just press once more. Again, you'll see that golden thread of what our youngest children in our system are asking for. So they're asking for more opportunities for learning outdoors. They're wanting to know about the climate emergency and what they can do to affect climate change. They want their views, their ideas and opinions listened to and acted upon. They're looking for us as adults and all of us in the system to protect and respect environments. They want their rights to be at the centre of what we do. They want sustainability to be there. And I think that word links is important. You know, as I said, making links across all of what we do. These things can all stand in isolation. We have to make those links across STEM, across sustainability, across different areas of the curriculum, and certainly from what I hear around that curriculum review and curriculum reform, it's about that interdisciplinary learning and that thematic learning and making links across subjects and across faculties and across our staff. So just, you know, that similar golden thread coming through in all that we do: voice, rights, environment, time outdoors, being listened to and being acted on. The next report is a fairly new one, and this one takes those voices of children but extends that into the voices of young people and practitioners. And I couldn't fit this all in one slide. There are 15 recommendations from this report. Those 15 recommendations that I've spread across 2 slides, but Kirsten, if you just press once more, you will see, again, just picking out those golden words from this report, that weaving through, that integration of LfS through all of that we do. We can't do it ourselves. It's about working with our communities, that agency with our partners, bringing that very much into policy. Time is important, and time like we're having tonight to talk with each other and to engage with practitioners in professional learning and training. And Kirsten, if you just do the same with the next slide quickly, just aware of time, but the same in the next slide, that idea of having LfS leads within schools, within clusters, within the local authority, you know, who is driving this forward currently within Dumfries and Galloway to drive this forward. And how am I supported by our partnership group, by the leads that we have in schools and by the team around me to drive that change forward? And what does that look like at school level and at cluster level as we start to formulate our school action plans? GTC are very clear what our values should be, those values that are embedded within the professional standards. Are we clear within our schools and within the people we work with what our values are? We talk about vision, values and aims being at the start of our school improvement plans here in Dumfries and Galloway. How up to date are those vision, values, aims? How do those vision, values, aims reflect all of the policy landscape that I've talked you through in the last 5 minutes? And how relevant are those vision, values, aims now in that period of post-COVID and that period of curriculum reform? So thank you, Kirsten. If you could just move on, that would be great. And just one slide here on that international context, because although this is very much the Scottish landscape, it is also the international landscape. And 3 documents we've spent a bit of time looking at in Dumfries and Galloway are these 3 here. So the first one looks at the UNESCO Global Teacher Survey. We mirrored survey in Dumfries and Galloway, and we asked our practitioners in Dumfries and Galloway many of the questions from that global survey. That global survey had responses from about 60,000 teachers, and they are just a couple of facts from it. Kirsten, if you press again, it should highlight some things there. So, you know, how confident are teachers in delivering? So we know what our children and young people are asking for, but of those 60,000 teachers, only 40% feel they're confident in delivering these aspects. So there's a piece of work for us to do as a national body in supporting teachers' confidence and supporting teachers' knowledge and skills to deliver these aspects. The second document there, I'm sure you're aware of, it's the PISA Global Competencies Survey. But again, it tells us our young people are scoring much lower in those areas that are highlighted. So how do we support our children and young people to be able to take action, to be able to take that learning out within and out with their classroom and affect change in their schools and in their communities? And the third document there specifically about climate, but looks at curriculums. It looks at, I think, about 40 different curriculums around the world, and it looks at the place of climate and climate emergency and climate change within those 40 curriculums. And again, it's a really good document to look at and support schools on their own climate curriculums and some key messages there nationally. So although we have our local context, although we have our national context, we also have our local context, and very much ourselves here in Dumfries and Galloway, we also have our local planning context to consider. So Kirsten, if you don't mind moving on, and just once more. So within Dumfries and Galloway, as within all local authorities in Scotland, we have a new administration. That new administration were elected in the council elections in May. Within Dumfries and Galloway, our new administration have just agreed a couple of weeks ago their plan for the next 5 years of our council. This is our 2023 to 2028 action plan. And within that action plan, we have our vision for what we want Dumfries and Galloway to be like in 5 years' time. And I think it's important to pick out in there that word fairness, that word connectedness, and that word sustainability, because we're not just doing this as education. We're not just doing this as our own directorate. This is part of that wider piece of work that we are doing as our council, thinking about those values and taking those values of fairness, connectedness and sustainability across what we do. Our council here in Dumfries and Galloway declared a climate emergency, as others did in 2029. From that council from that climate emergency, we have an action plan that all directorates across the council and all staff across the council should be following. We are trying to be carbon neutral much more quickly than some other local authorities. We're trying to be carbon neutral by 2025. So there are key aspirations for all of us to get to that stage. And part of that work is that I have to report to our elected members each year, and I have done so now for the last 3 years, reported to elected members what we are doing within the Education and Learning Directorate to support our aspiration of that action plan, that 12-point action plan, and that aim of being carbon neutral. So next slide, Kirsten, just takes that a little bit further, and just once more, Kirsten, it shows what our council plan looks like. This is a document that we've prepared to share across our council. At the top there, you've got vision, but underneath the vision, you've got the key principles of our council plan. The first section there talks about safeguarding the future. And within safeguarding the future, we are talking about climate emergency. We're talking about our natural capital, our natural landscapes. Within the second section, we're talking about how we support our citizens, how we support the most vulnerable, on equity and equality. The third section there talks about supporting our communities, and that's about the partnership working. That's about engaging with our community groups and our schools very much as being part of those wider communities in Dumfries and Galloway. And the fourth section there talks about being a responsive and responsible council, and that's about sustainability and using our resources in a sustainable manner, and recycling, etc., fits in there. Further underneath that, we have these 4 themes that all our council work should be planned around. And I've just highlighted there in the third column the themes to do with education and learning, and those talk about inclusion, those talk about participation and creativity, those talk about outdoor learning, and those talk about partnerships and building the skills and confidence of local people. So all through all of those different pages, I would hope you can see that golden thread and those golden themes of sustainability through all of that policy landscape. And Kirsten, the next slide is just how we have articulated that within Dumfries and Galloway. And just once more, you'll see those golden threads, that golden vocabulary. So this is our Dumfries and Galloway Learning for Sustainability strategy that we've worked on with our Learning for Sustainability Partnership Group. That slide that Betsy showed at the start around the 2030 action plan, but it highlights those aspirations locally and nationally, and we've added in an extra one. We've added in that 4th one, and that 4th one in Dumfries and Galloway is about youth voice, youth participation, leadership at all levels, and using that voice, using that participation, using that leadership to take action and affect positive change. And Kirsten, if you can just press once more, hopefully those are the words that will become highlighted. So although we are taking all of that national and local landscape, we're very much driving that forward in our schools with those areas that are highlighted there, and very much children and young people and voice at the heart of what we do. So how does that fit into school improvement planning? My next slide takes that a step forward, and I've got 3 different visuals on this slide here. The first one is the quote that I think, if nothing else, if you leave with tonight, and it's one of the quotes from the Children's Parliament report. It's a quote from a 10-year-old child, really telling us and asking us that this is what we should have to do. We should all have LfS, because if we learn about it, we'll do something about it. And if we do something about it, then more people will change the world and more voices will be heard. And for me, that's what we do. And whether we're talking about school improvement plans, whether we're talking about curriculum, whether we're talking about learning and teaching, it's about giving our children and young people that voice and using that voice to affect positive change. So for me, that's the vision of LfS. I don't think anybody could put it any better than that 10-year-old child. The Wordle there, I've chosen a slightly different Wordle from the one that Kirsten shared. I've taken all of my golden words, I've taken all of my golden threads from all of those documents that I've discussed, and I've created that Wordle there. And no surprise, it's very similar to Betsy's Wordle, but it's those golden threads of we do this because it's about learning, it's about change, it's about participation, it's about taking the community with us. Climate's there, climate's important, biodiversity is important, But for me, learning for sustainability is more than climate and biodiversity. It's all of these other areas as well. And although those areas are important and we see those areas coming through in improvement plans, for me to be truly thinking about learning for sustainability, it's all of those areas. It's all of those golden threads. And Kirsten, I think if you press one more, you get a wee golden thread just to show those golden threads going through all of those areas. And I think, you know, learning for sustainability is about that head, heart and hands. The head is the policy. The head is the knowledge. We can be rehearsed on that. We can read about that. We can ask others for information about that. So the head is the policy. The heart is the vision. You know, for me, it's old girl, 10-year-old child's vision, but it's the vision. It's the purposes. Jackie, for you, it's the values that you talked about. That's what's in our heart. That's why we do what we do. That's the heart. And then the head, the hands, is how we do it. How do we take all of that forward and how do we do it? And we do that through school improvement planning, and we do that through that positive change in our schools, and how we plan for that change, how we take that change forward, and then importantly, in terms of those key performance indicators, how we report on that change, how we measure impact, and how we report on that change going forward. So I'm almost there, Kirsten. I think just one more slide to go through. So in terms of school improvement planning, you know, learning for sustainability is the approach. For me, it shouldn't necessarily feature on a school improvement plan in itself. It's the approach that we do, and whatever we do, learning for sustainability should be there and should be woven through. It's something for us all to engage with, that enabling all of us to be part of it. And it's the weave. It's the weave through everything we do. Now, going through all of that wordle that I created, these are the words that I picked out. I picked out self-evaluation around vision and values. I picked out leadership. I picked out curriculum. I picked out learning and teaching. I picked out voice, participation, partnerships with ourselves and with our communities, professional learning, and evaluation and impact. Now, all of those words are school improvement planning. All of those words are almost the structure for how good is our school. They are almost the structure for the Education Scotland LfS self-evaluation toolkit. So whatever you choose to do within your school improvement plan next year will be linked to those themes that are there. I'm absolutely sure you will be looking at curriculum, you'll be looking at pedagogy, you'll be looking at partnerships, you'll be looking at vision and values. So my kind of ask and my finishing point for everything tonight is about how you embed LfS, Kirsten. And if you can just press once more, it's that approach, how you embed this approach to what we do, to engaging everybody, particularly those children and young people, and how we get that weave, because ultimately this is about the LfS, it's about children, you know, LfS is about that better world, creating that better world. For me, that's why I do my quality improvement job. My quality improvement job is about better schools, better outcomes, better world. So I'm going to finish there because I think that's the natural point to finish, and just let you ponder and think about those four words that are outlined there. That approach, that all of us together, that weave through all of that we do, because ultimately it's about that better world. And I think Betsy's going to take you into some discussion next, and if you can take that vision and those words into that discussion, I think, Betsy, that's probably a good place to leave things tonight.
Thank you so much, David, for inspiring us all. And I think I loved at the end that you brought in that voice of learners, but then I think there's so much in that last slide of, well, where do we go from here, and how do we, and I like this last slide that we haven't gone into, which is there is support for this, and of course that's partly what these sessions are all about, and certainly delving deeper into the Learning for Sustainability Hub. We hope that there's support for all those areas that you mentioned. But absolutely brilliant, and I'm sure people are really buzzing with questions and thoughts, and just thinking about how do we use this So the next session is really for you to gather and think about that. I'm just